A seemingly subdued courtroom defeat evolved into a significant public confrontation. Karoline Leavitt confronted a formidable judge, compelling the entire system to reflect critically on itself. A solitary sentence emerged, creating waves throughout New Hampshire's conservative community. The case has been dismissed. Absence of standing. Karoline Leavitt remained motionless at the rear of the Concord courtroom. Her jaw tightened, her hands gripping the printed summary of voter complaints. For weeks, she dedicated herself to collecting affidavits from local poll watchers and election officials who observed peculiar inconsistencies during the previous cycle. She had faith in the structure. She was convinced that a lawful route existed to guarantee equity. However, the judge, Douglas Keener, a seasoned figure with 3 decades of experience and known for his enigmatic demeanor, had different plans in mind. He hardly lifted his gaze from the bench as he delivered his verdict. No trial. There are no witnesses. Merely a frigid rejection. Next to Karoline was Russ Barkley, a former Marine and the county registrar. Is that all? He whispered under his breath. Is it really that simple? Karoline remained silent. Thoughts surged through her mind, too swift to be captured in language. They emerged into the parking lot, where a handful of local reporters lingered, jotting down notes with a palpable lack of enthusiasm. The major networks failed to make an appearance. A young woman from a local AM radio station approached Karoline, microphone in hand. Miss Leavitt, do you have any thoughts on the judge's decision? Karoline fixed her gaze on the microphone. He chose not to dismiss the case due to the strength of the facts. He brushed it aside, unwilling to listen to them. The journey is far from over. It wasn't mere bravado. It was a vow. Later that night, in her kitchen in Rye, Karoline listened to the judge's words on her phone repeatedly. Absence of standing. It felt unsettling, not merely because it signified the conclusion of the case, but because it seemed predetermined, as if the verdict had been decided long before they entered that courtroom. George, her dad, stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the counter behind her. Are you really going to let this go without a response? No, Karoline said, her gaze fixed on the screen. Something feels amiss with him, concerning everything related to this. George recognized that inflection in her voice. At 17, she had wielded it previously, confronting the school board over their decision to cancel a veterans' assembly. She possessed that same intensity now, but it was more refined. However, this was not high school. This represented the justice system. The following morning, Karoline arrived at the campaign office, burdened by a pile of papers and a look of fatigue in her eyes. She flung the file onto the table. I seek a comprehensive record of every decision made by Judge Keener over the past 5 years. Taylor, her aide, blinked. Every single one? Absolutely. I want to uncover the identities of his clerks, the individuals he's dined with, the contributors to his retirement fund. Every detail matters. It wasn't driven by a desire for retribution. Not at this moment. It revolved around finding solutions. However, solutions in politics are rarely straightforward. The discoveries she made in the following week left her feeling utterly nauseated. Judge Keener had previously been employed at a firm that discreetly advocated for political organizations from outside the state. His grown son served on the board of a nonprofit focused on voter outreach, which had recently secured a donation from a PAC connected to a current Democratic senator. Scattered throughout were photographs, event programs, a series of dinners, and endorsements that had quietly gone unnoticed. However, none of it had ever been documented. Karoline settled into a booth with Russ once more, this time at a diner in Bedford. With a deliberate motion, she retrieved a manila folder from her bag and smoothly slid it across the table. What is this? He inquired. All the secrets Judge Keener wishes to keep hidden from the public eye. Russ turned the pages with a deliberate motion. Are you considering reaching out to the media? Karoline took a delicate sip of her coffee. No, not at this moment. If I'm undertaking this, I'm executing it correctly. As Karoline pieced together the clues, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. It was entirely unrelated to any documentation. Karoline found herself restless at night. Amidst public appearances and thorough explorations of Judge Keener's background, she often awoke in the dead of night, her thoughts swirling with unresolved inquiries. It had transcended his singular narrative. It was a rhythm, one she couldn't yet articulate, but she sensed it deep within her being. She began reaching out to individuals, silently, individuals who once served as clerks, those who have retired from court roles, and attorneys who have previously appeared before Keener in various cases. Many preferred silence. Some did, but only in a private capacity. Among them was Harold Kessler, a defense attorney from Manchester who had not engaged in practice for more than 10 years. They encountered each other at a dilapidated pizza establishment near I-93, the sort of place featuring worn-out booths and a jukebox that had been silent since 2005. "Are you truly intent on pursuing Keener?" he inquired, his tone hushed, gaze sweeping across the space. She responded with a desire to understand if he has acted justly. Harold reclined, savoring a lengthy sip of his soda before remarking that he exercises caution, always avoiding leaving fingerprints. However, he is politically engaged, a commitment he's maintained since the late 90s. "What you're sensing is real." Karoline inclined her body forward. "Could you provide me with some names? Is there something specific?" "No," he replied. "However, I can assure you, there's a purpose behind his choice to maintain that distance. Though his hands may be spotless, his companions are far from it." That evening, she returned to the office and reached out to Taylor and another aide, Jenna. She meticulously presented her findings, the binders, the donor maps, the events, and the court decisions that all pointed in a specific direction. Jenna remarked, carefully sifting through the notes, "This may not suffice for an expose, but it certainly has the makings of a tempest." Karoline gave a subtle nod. "We are not releasing any content. We will compel him to act." "In what way?" Her lips curved into a smile. "Stress." The following morning, Karoline filmed a brief video for social media, addressing the camera directly. "A judge in New Hampshire holds the view that individuals like you should not question the integrity of your elections. He closed the case without considering the evidence presented. He claimed it was insignificant, yet we uncovered something. Patterns, connections, biases, and now we are poised to illuminate every aspect of it." She chose not to give him a name. "Not at this moment, but the message has been received." In just a few hours, her inbox overflowed with messages from supporters, skeptics, and journalists alike. A few were eager to lend a hand. Some sought evidence, yet she was prepared for either outcome. Suddenly, an unexpected occurrence took place. A woman named Dana contacted us via a secure email. No last name, no introduction, simply put, "I was employed at the state courthouse. I witnessed moments. I will speak." In the fading light of a Thursday afternoon, they gathered in the church parking lot just outside Laconia. Dana, in her 50s, had a wiry frame and tired eyes, exuding a nervous energy that prompted Karoline to speak in hushed tones. Dana mentioned that he met with lobbyists, not in chambers but rather in tranquil spots, coffee shops in Portsmouth, always accompanied by the same person, Tommy Velt. Karoline jotted down in her notebook, "Who is the donor?" Dana gave a slight nod. "Additionally, there is a woman with blonde hair who is employed at a firm in Boston. Is there any way to substantiate this?" Dana paused for a moment, then delved into her coat pocket and presented Karoline with a neatly folded receipt. "He remained oblivious to my presence, yet I witnessed everything unfold." The eve of a significant decision had arrived, the one that would dismantle the election audit bill. Karoline carefully opened the receipt. It was marked 2 days prior to Keener's ruling in another prominent case, one that prevented a more thorough examination of ballots across the state. "What is the reason for presenting this to me at this moment?" Karoline inquired. "Because someone has to care," Dana said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I believed things would improve. It did not." Yet Karoline understood that this went beyond merely revealing dubious dinners. It was about compelling the nation to acknowledge what had been overlooked for far too long. Dana's insight transformed everything. Karoline exited the church parking lot, clutching a crumpled receipt and a burning determination within her. The meeting may not have provided all she desired, yet it offered her the most essential thing, a thread to pull. She began her journey with Tommy Velt. His name had appeared previously, nestled within a list of contributors from a super PAC based in Maine, but Dana's reference brought it to the forefront. Velt was not merely a donor. He was a facilitator, a figure who orchestrated exclusive dinners among judges, attorneys, and select operatives who maintained a pristine image, yet consistently emerged with advantageous decisions. Karoline's initial call was to Anthony Becker, a former state senator who had been ousted from politics for exposing campaign finance violations. He resided in a quaint town close to Nashua, largely keeping to himself. "I'm aware of who Tommy is," Anthony remarked, "yet you won't see him making the news. He operates in the darkness. He offers substantial sums to lesser-known individuals and anticipates unwavering loyalty in return. Steadfast devotion." Karoline delved deeper. Could Keener have anticipated what awaited him in that meeting? Certainly, Anthony replied. Lunch with Tommy is never a coincidence. If Keener encountered him, it was due to their shared involvement in something significant. It wasn't definitive evidence, not at this moment, but it was a recurring theme that refused to fade. She continued to excavate. The walls of her office gradually transformed into an intricate tapestry of timelines, events, connections, and faces. Strands of crimson thread connected names across the corkboards. To an outsider, it appeared paranoid, yet it resonated perfectly with her team. Then arrived a fortunate twist of fate. Jenna, the assistant who had meticulously arranged the donor information, stumbled upon a PDF hidden within a dusty campaign finance archive. A dinner held 3 years ago at the Blackbrook Inn in Keene, hosted by a think tank, had an RSVP list that captured the attendees. Subtly, without fanfare, the attendees included Tommy Velt, a Boston-based election consultant named Madeline Rowan, and Judge Douglas Keener. Karoline stared at the file, heart racing. "He was present," she murmured. Everyone was present. They looked for images from the event, but came up empty-handed. There are no tweets or tagged images available. The document had been meticulously scrubbed clean, yet it still held sufficient weight. She reached out to a familiar columnist, someone she had confidence in, Daniel Reed from the Nashua Report. Initially, he had doubts about her, yet he admired her unwavering determination. "I steer clear of hit pieces," he cautioned her during the call. "This isn't a success," she replied. "It's a recurring theme, and I will reveal each and every page to you." They convened the following day. Karoline arrived with 2 boxes filled with documents, receipts, statements, and archived filings, revealing connections among names that had gone unnoticed. Daniel dedicated 3 hours to meticulously sifting through everything in quiet contemplation. He glanced upward and remarked, "You've got smoke. Discovering fire means we've uncovered something genuine." He consented to publish a piece, but with caution, no allegations, merely facts presented with dates and specifics. The piece was published that Sunday. Concerns grow regarding the behavior of the judiciary in the election integrity matter. While it didn't directly accuse Judge Keener, it raised questions about the appropriateness of a sitting judge dining privately with political consultants just before making rulings on matters closely linked to their interests. The narrative ignited with the intensity of a flame catching on parched earth. It was picked up by talk radio. Local anchors started reaching out to Karoline for interviews. The online platforms buzzed with activity. Some criticized her, others stood by her, but she was no longer overlooked. And that was the moment the courthouse itself started to respond. An unidentified clerk disclosed an internal email. Judge Keener announced the cancellation of court proceedings for the next 3 days. Karoline sat in her car, enveloped in silence after receiving the news, her gaze fixed on the dashboard as her thoughts swirled with endless possibilities. She murmured, "He's concealed." Just as Karoline was ready to move forward, an unforeseen event occurred. A member of Judge Keener's circle made contact. A message arrived via a temporary email, lacking a signature, consisting of only a single sentence. "I'm at a loss to support him any longer. You were correct." A solitary image was included. Karoline opened the file with deliberate care, her breath hitching as the image began to materialize. It had a rough quality, obviously taken covertly, yet it was undeniably clear. Judge Keener sat at a secluded table in a tranquil corner of a seafood restaurant in Portsmouth, facing Tommy Velt and Madeline Roan. A server glided over, carrying a bottle of wine. Each of them appeared at ease, serene in their surroundings. The photo's timestamp was merely 6 days prior to Keener's dismissal of the election integrity case. This was not a mere happenstance. Karoline sent it along to Daniel Reed, keeping the subject line straightforward. Here lies the flame. In just 24 hours, the Nashua report released a follow-up. A private dinner involving a judge and political donors sparks concerns regarding potential judicial bias. The image was prominently displayed. The response was immediate. Listeners from the community overwhelmed the phone lines. Television hosts invited legal experts. Individuals who had previously overlooked courtrooms found themselves engaged in discussions about judicial ethics while waiting in line at the grocery store. Keener's team issued a lackluster statement. He insisted that the dinner was merely a coincidence and that there was no conversation related to the case, yet no one seemed convinced. Voters were not lacking in intelligence. They recognized when the game was afoot. On that very day, Karoline's office was inundated with more than 500 emails. Some came from citizens voicing their own grievances regarding Keener, but a handful, Jim, stood apart. A former legislative aide who had served under a Democratic state representative was the source of one account. The email stated that he assisted in securing Keener's reappointment 3 years prior. Claimed he was dependable. That word has always lingered in my mind. A further account emerged from a woman who had lodged a civil complaint against a local official connected to campaign fraud. Her case had been dismissed by none other than Keener. Karoline examined each one with great attention. Some were not applicable, some were mere speculation, yet the overall narrative was unmistakable. A particular atmosphere existed, a culture where certain individuals moved with unspoken approval, and Keener, whether intentionally or by happenstance, had found himself woven into its fabric. On that Friday, Karoline convened a press conference. She stood before a courthouse, not the state one, but the historic county courthouse in Goffstown. Intentional, meaningful. Behind her stood boxes filled with documents, each marked clearly in bold black ink. Chronologies, relationships, correspondence, contributors, decisions. Journalists from all corners of the state gathered. She refrained from raising her voice. She refrained from making any accusations. She guided them through every element. Perhaps it's just a coincidence, she remarked, lifting a folder. Secondly, you pose inquiries. However, when it evolves into a recurring theme, when you connect choices to gatherings, gatherings to contributions, and contributions to tangible advantages, then it ceases to be mere chance. It's deceit dressed in civility. She hesitated. Allow the stillness to linger. Your choice of candidate is your own business. This isn't about celebration. This revolves around trust. And when our courts lose that foundation, everything else begins to crumble. It was more than merely the words. Their clarity was unmistakable. She wasn't seeking attention. She was constructing her argument meticulously, layer by layer, for all to see. The press conference was broadcast across all local stations. A clip of her speech aired on national television the following morning. Conservative commentators praised her determination. Independent outlets commended her for maintaining professionalism and not taking it personally. However, Keener's camp soon broke the silence. By Monday, his lawyer had submitted a cease and desist letter to Karoline, alleging defamation and requesting that she withdraw her statements. The document oozed with intimidation, yet lacked any real refutations. Karoline's legal advisor perused the document and chuckled. It was a quintessential deception, he remarked. He aims to instill fear in you. However, should this become public knowledge, we may finally compel an investigation into ethical practices. That same afternoon, Karoline found herself in her office, the windows wide open, with the folder of evidence spread out before her on the desk. Taylor entered the room, clutching a printed email. You won't believe what I'm about to share. The source was the Judicial Conduct Committee. A preliminary inquiry into Judge Keener's conduct was being opened. As the narrative unfolded, Karoline came to understand that this was not merely about seeking accountability from a single individual. The focus was on what lay ahead and if the system possessed the resolve to mend its own flaws. Keener was absent from court for the following 8 days. His docket was subtly reassigned. His chambers, previously alive with activity and bustling with staff, now remained shrouded in darkness behind drawn blinds. No formal clarification was provided, yet rumors within the courthouse spread swiftly. Clerks conversed in muted whispers. Lawyers started seeking different judges, pointing out possible conflicts of interest. The silence enveloping Keener was unmistakably not born of respect. The atmosphere was thick with tension, palpable even through the cold marble walls. In the meantime, Karoline seemed to be omnipresent. Fox, Newsmax, and a handful of centrist outlets with a critical edge featured her in interviews. Her tone remained consistent, steady, straightforward. She recited a single line repeatedly. This transcends mere political victory. This focuses on rekindling fundamental belief. Yet, as she continued to express her thoughts, the intensity of the opposition escalated. Her inbox was inundated with anonymous accounts hurling insults and threats. Her private address was leaked online. Demonstrators gathered outside her residence in Rye, brandishing signs that charged her with undermining democracy. Her father remained unfazed. He lingered at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, challenging anyone to set foot on their grass. "Let them wave their signs," he murmured. "They express anger rooted in fear." Karoline stood her ground. She increased security measures. She avoided Twitter and continued to forge ahead. 2 weeks following the press conference, the Judicial Conduct Committee issued their initial public statement. They acknowledged that they were examining whether Judge Keener had breached ethical standards due to undisclosed connections with political donors and consultants before making significant rulings. The term, undisclosed, captured attention in the news. It was only a matter of time before politicians began to separate themselves. A state representative who previously lauded Keener is now evading inquiries and interviews. Several local leaders who previously accepted donations from Tommy Velt abruptly returned the funds and released statements asserting their ignorance of any wrongdoing. Karoline observed the gradual unfolding with a calm determination. She was not in a festive mood. Not at this moment. For each victory, there remained resistance. On a particular evening, she encountered Russ once more, this time at a VFW hall in Pelham, where they had been invited to participate in a panel discussion regarding election security. The space was filled to capacity. Veterans, retirees, young parents, some filled with doubt, while others expressed clear enthusiasm. A senior gentleman at the rear rose to his feet during the question and answer session. He mentioned that he has been voting for 50 years. "I have always been present for every single one. I have no interest in whether someone identifies as a Democrat or a Republican. I'm eager to understand how we can prevent this from occurring in the future." Karoline inhaled deeply. She mentioned it by creating a commotion, by choosing not to allow matters to remain hidden. When you observe something, express it. When others attempt to stifle your voice, amplify it instead. Systems require intervention to be repaired. Individuals repair them. Individuals appreciate your presence. The room erupted in applause. Not excessively, not for show. The applause was measured and deliberate, a reflection of consensus rather than enthusiasm. Yet not all in that room joined in the applause. In Concord, Keener's legal team was actively engaged in their efforts. A request was submitted to dismiss the ethics investigation, highlighting claims of unjust public bias and politically driven defamation. The attempt was fraught with urgency, yet it ultimately failed. The committee rejected the request and proceeded to the next stage, formal review. That entailed evidence, observers, records. Dana, the ex-court employee who had put everything on the line to connect with Karoline, consented to provide her testimony, discreetly yet formally. 2 additional individuals also stepped forward following the press conference. The net was drawing closer. Then arrived the call. a member of the House Oversight Subcommittee made contact. A panel was being assembled to examine judicial bias at the state level. Karoline was expected to take the stand. She gazed at the phone, her mind racing with incredulity. "Are you suggesting that I travel to Washington?" Indeed, the voice responded. "A flame has been ignited. We are eager to learn about your process." Yet Karoline understood that the true battle lay beyond the confines of courtrooms and the glare of headlines. It resided within the souls of everyday individuals who were beginning to confront difficult inquiries. The Capitol seemed to chill her more than she had anticipated. Karoline strolled along the corridor outside the hearing room, clad in a dark navy blazer and modest low heels. Her notes were carefully folded in her hand. There was no media attention surrounding her. Without a following, only she remained, accompanied by the rhythmic echo of polished shoes meeting the tile. Within the confines of the room, a considerable number of people had already gathered. Staff members in Congress sifted through stacks of documents. A handful of representatives sat in silence behind the lengthy raised bench, perusing their briefing packets. The chair of the subcommittee, Congressman Roland Mays from Texas, glanced up and offered a subtle nod as Karoline settled into her seat at the witness table. Only audio recordings, no cameras involved. The public transcript will be made available at a later time. The aim was not to create tension. It was pure understanding. Karoline positioned the microphone with care, poised and ready for the cue. "Ms. Leavitt," Mays requested, "kindly start with your statement." She began with a single line. "I didn't arrive here to discuss a man. I arrived to discuss a system. It was spontaneous. It was simply genuine." She meticulously detailed the timeline, the dinner, the connections, the discreet donor circles, and the cases that subtly disappeared before attracting any attention. She remained calm. She remained genuine. She narrated the tale as it truly was, for it was indeed that way. She took a moment to reflect. "I'm aware of individuals who believe this is merely about politics, as if we're engaged in some sort of team competition. However, without trust in our judges, we lose faith in everything. Neither elections, nor laws, nor fairness. Trust is not shattered in an instant. It diminishes gradually each time a figure of authority escapes accountability, simply because the necessary inquiries were never made." A delegate from Oregon leaned in closer. "Are you implying that Judge Keener took bribes?" Karoline replied, "No. What I'm suggesting is that favors aren't always packaged neatly. At times, they resemble family dinners or job opportunities for relatives, or perhaps a serene conversation prior to a decision. If we continue to act as though that isn't influence, then we have already failed." Her voice remained steady throughout. The session extended for a duration of 2 hours. Questions arose, some warm and inviting, others more inquisitive. Yet Karoline remained steadfast. As the final moments came to a close, she collected her papers with a sense of purpose and exited with a quiet grace. There was no fanfare, no bright lights, just an endless corridor and a woman who spoke her truth, regardless of the price she had to pay. 2 days later, the findings of the Judicial Conduct Committee were made public. Judge Keener breached several standards of conduct, exhibiting a troubling pattern of inappropriate relationships with political donors and consultants who had vested interests in ongoing court proceedings. He was presented with the choice to step down. He accepted it. The story gained traction in the media. Karoline received some praise. Some ridiculed her, labeling her as someone desperate for power. Yet the facts remained undeniable. In Concord, the news lost its luster in just a week. Individuals continued with their lives, yet an unspoken change had taken place, one that would last indefinitely. Karoline chose not to make her way back to the courtroom. There was no necessity for her to do so. Instead, she returned to Rye, to her kitchen table where everything had begun. She flipped open her laptop, beginning to craft a new piece of legislation, one that would mandate all judges in the state to reveal their meetings with lobbyists and political consultants. There will be no exceptions. She referred to it as the Transparent Bench Act. A few weeks later, at a town hall in Dover, she faced the crowd and remarked, "Change doesn't happen all at once. Transform it one truth at a time. An elderly woman rose to her feet and inquired, "Do you believe it had an impact?" Karoline beamed. "I'm certain it did, as the next time someone attempts to make a choice without clarity, they'll reconsider." What started with a dismissal culminated in accountability, not solely for one judge, but for every individual who overlooked the significance of their voice. If you hold a conviction in truth, if you stand for fairness, true, genuine fairness, then let your voice be heard. Remaining quiet does not ensure harmony. The issue persists,